My story begins in northern Indiana, where I grew up, and not very far from where this picture was taken, actually. And if you head out of town in pretty much any direction, this is the view you will find. It is corn and soybeans, as far as the eye can see, with some trees mixed in occasionally. And so you can just imagine the awe and wonder that I experienced the first time I went out west during college, because Utah was nothing like the place where I grew up. It had topography, it had amazing geology, and I'm a huge nerd, and it had colors and shapes beyond my wildest dreams. And so I was just thoroughly convinced by the time I came home that even the ugliest places I saw in Utah were more beautiful and more interesting than any place I had ever seen in my own home state. So it's probably not a huge surprise that by the time I graduated from college, I was heading out west. And so I eventually ended up in the Tetons, and this was actually the view off my front porch for 2 of the 4 years that I lived there. And the Tetons was also where I married my husband. And so he worked for the National Park Service, and so we moved around a few times early in his career, and we eventually ended up in Yosemite. I know, it was rough. Because it's one of the crown jewels of the National Park Service, and Yosemite was also the place where our 7-year marriage and our 10-year romantic relationship came to its natural conclusion. And so by the time I was finished with my coaching program at UC Davis, I was divorced, I was a free agent, I could live anywhere. And so my plan was to just travel around the country and coach by phone and work on my first book, but my first step was going to be to go home for the holidays. And so I went back home, and within about 2 weeks of being home, it was very clear that my dad was sick and that my mom was really struggling to try to continue to help him and both my 96-year-old great aunt. She was overseeing her care. And so I vividly remember the morning when I accepted the invitation from the universe to stay in my hometown. And we had had a huge snowstorm the day before, and it was bitterly cold the next morning, but the skies had cleared, and I figured if I was going to be staying in the Midwest, I was going to make the best of it. So I put on all my layers, and I grabbed my camera, and I headed out the door to the closest patch of nature that I knew I would be able to find on 2 legs because the roads were impassable. And it was just a patch of undeveloped land at the end of the street, and I had to get over a mound of construction dirt to get there. So I'm like waddling over this knee-deep snow, just trying to get to the other side, just want to see some trees. And this was the view that I saw. And I'm trying not to cry, because in this moment, I felt this sense of like my heart just bursting open, and it was flooded with this sense of infinity and possibility and pristine beauty. And I knew this feeling so well because I had experienced it 1,000 times before in 100 other places, and I never in my life expected to feel those feelings in my hometown. Wow. And this moment taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. And that is the only difference between this and all the pictures I just showed you is a story. And that the stories that we tell ourselves have the profound power to shape our experience of our reality. And this was the seed of a lesson that was planted in me when I lived in the Tetons, because after seeing this view for 2 years every day, this became normal. This was just every day. And so in order to continue to experience awe and wonder, that feeling that we want to feel, I had to learn how to look closer and see with new eyes, because I wasn't feeling those same feelings as much as I used to. And so when I finally trained my eye to do this, it was with my point and shoot digital camera. I discovered all of these little details that I had been overlooking. And I discovered that there were worlds within worlds all around me, just waiting to be noticed. And so I now have, after years of being, just kind of training my eyes to see this way, I see it everywhere. And so you'll see me on foggy days out looking for spider webs, and I love finding it in places that other people would not look at or overlook or even, kind of dismiss as ugly or unwanted. And I see it on the side of my house when I'm going in and out the door taking out the recycling. I even see it in grocery store parking lots. I'm not even going to begin to describe to you the looks on the people's faces when I saw me taking that, but I don't care. It's because these types of experiences just remind me again and again that perspective is everything. And that these feelings of awe and wonder that we crave, they are not tied to a place. They are inside of us. And that they are just waiting to be triggered by the slightest shift in your perspective. And so if I could just leave you with one last thought tonight, it would be this, that when we look at the world around us without expectations or comparisons, we find that we are surrounded by the miraculous ordinary every single moment of our lives. So.